Welcome to another March Madness Tournament of Champions face-off. This is a group stage matchup between Robert Geller's Baron Mordo and Ralph Edwards' Dark Phoenix. Baron Mordo wins the dice roll and opts to go first. This is going to be a somewhat unusual matchup in that Baron Mordo, who is typically a control deck, is going to be able to be quite a bit more aggressive against Dark Phoenix because of her slow pace of play and low stat block. Both players opt to throw away their opening hands and mulligan for something better. Mordo rose a blue basic location, and while there was no recruit, being able to pay a blue to force a discard allows Mordo to get a turn one experience and also starts the disruption of the Dark Phoenix deck. Net Launcher is one of those key cards in this Dark Phoenix build, hoping to keep threats face down on the opposing side of the board while she ramps and starts to throw large threats down herself. Getting that in the opening discard is a pretty strong hit. Phoenix has no recruits on her turn and does not have the second yellow to ramp. Going into turn 2, Mordo also has no recruits, but does get a Fisk Tower, which is sufficient to force another discard, gaining his second experience. While chipping away at a player's locations is a valuable thing to do, that was not really an optimal hit for that turn 2 discard. As Mordo, I'm looking to hit things like Kane. I want to prevent what is, what was, and what will be from allowing additional ramp as much as possible. I think John got a little wishful thinking there, trying to put that Madripoor into hand. So Kane finds another basic blue location, which essentially replaces the one that I nuked out of the Dark Phoenix hand on turn 2. So typically you would want to hide Dark Phoenix behind Kane. So you could look at this formation as a small misplay. Neither character has sufficient attack to get into Mordo, so combat was not going to happen during Dark Phoenix's turn. On turn 3, Mordo places a vault and recruits Psylocke, heading into the exposed Dark Phoenix. Phoenix eats her first wound and then has to discard another card while Mordo gains his third XP. Now, given the attack stats on Dark Phoenix and Mordo, getting the entire board clear was not going to be a problem. The blue that Kane got last turn ends up being discarded by Psylocke's discard effect, and Kane hits the KO pile. Trophy area enters the row on turn 3 for Dark Phoenix, and another copy of Kane comes down. I was somewhat jubilant about Kane again not hitting a yellow. The wound that was placed on Dark Phoenix there was the one from last turn. John just hadn't moved the counter over yet. She did not get an additional wound during her turn. Again, this is similar to the turn 2 situation Dark Phoenix found herself in. There's no attacks that are sufficient to hit anything on Mordo's side of the board. Basic green location enters the row from Mordo, and then Spider-Gwen recruit is declared, and she's searched out of the deck and enters play using her dimensional wristwatch. The real purpose of this character in the Mordo deck is to activate the Build a Better Worlds, which I immediately do. And going into main phase, I use Mesmerize and force another random discard from Dark Phoenix's hand. At that point, I remembered that it had to be random, and the Serpent Crown is hit. That is a pretty significant card in this matchup. Well, in any matchup. Serpent Crown is one of the more powerful turn 7 plays a deck can have. Build a Better World is played again from hand to turn the Predator ship basic blue location face up, and then Spider-Gwen is sent into Dark Phoenix. This is answered with a dramatic entrance to try to hold the wounds off of the main character, and Fing Fang Foom comes down, KOing Spider-Gwen, and then heading to the KO pile himself. At this point, I asked if John had a Jungle Hunter because the additional ramp would have been huge. Unfortunately, that was not available to him. This was kind of a hold my breath attack here. I was really worried about another dramatic entrance coming down and clearing Psylocke off the board. And I was right to be concerned. Dark Phoenix discards dramatic entrance to Psylocke's effect, proving that he had it in hand. Unfortunately, the remaining cards in hand were all equipment and not able to be used with the plot twist. So the least punishing discard was the dead plot twist. Mordo cleans Kane off the board, and turn is passed to Dark Phoenix. Basic blue location enters the row for Phoenix's turn 4, and 3 turns in a row, Kane is the recruit. Now, my luck was bound to run out eventually, and Phoenix definitely deserved to finally get another yellow location. And despite the futility of it at this point, we caught on to the fact, hey, Phoenix should probably be hiding in the back row, using Kane as a protector, and not vice versa. Academy is discarded from hand to what is, what was, and what will be, as well as the first resource played being flipped. Unfortunately, both of the cards coming off the top of the deck are not only not locations, they're large threats. The kind of large threats Phoenix is trying to ramp to in order to win the game. With no attacks available to Dark Phoenix, the turn is again passed. Now, if you've watched other videos that we put out for this event, this one does have quite a few more cuts in it because we talked through a lot of the plays in an effort to make sure we weren't making mistakes. Academy is Road for Mordo, and then Zemo and Ronin are both recruited. Going into main phase, a yellow is paid to Zemo to sow distrust. Really what I was trying to do here was get a look at his hand so I could make sure the Ronin activation would hit something of value. I used the vault to accuse Dark Phoenix of holding the net launcher because I'm actually afraid of that card. And if I recall correctly, Ralph only had 2 copies in his build, so I went after that pretty aggressively. I then used Mordo's power to force the final discard. Now, this could be considered a misplay here. Knowing there's only 1 card in hand, he's not going to be able to dramatic entrance something threatening in play that could kill Phoenix, or it can kill Psylocke. So Psylocke attacking into Kane could have forced the discard without me having to spend the blue, but kind of ended up in the same place anyway. Dark Phoenix is sitting with 3 wounds and more resources available, but at this point the hole is starting to get pretty deep. Keys enters play targeting Dark Phoenix, which allows the basic blue and basic green to be used to pay for what is, what was, and what will be, letting Phoenix ramp on 2 successive turns. One of those ramped cards turns out to be a basic green location, essentially replacing the one that was just used to the effect. This is the kind of thing Phoenix wants to be doing on turn 2 and 3. I mean, it's good at any point in the game to get ahead of your opponent on resources, but this is feeling a little, too late. Keys attacks into Ronin and puts a wound on that character. And then Dark Phoenix clears Helmet Zemo off the board. For a moment, I have a flash of old verses, thinking about the difference between columns and rows, but I'm very quickly corrected and reminded which game we're actually playing. After those attacks, turn is passed back to Baron Mordo. And I'm feeling pretty good. Place down a vault into the row. And while I underdropped last turn, and I'm going to be forced to underdrop again this turn, the card advantage that I have is pretty significant. Taskmaster is recruited for Baron Mordo. Everybody's in the front row, although I have a wobble about protecting Ronin for a moment. Taskmaster copied Keys, and then when he enters play, targets Baron Mordo, allowing me to use the basic green in my row to force Dark Phoenix to discard the final card from her hand. I then have sufficient attack to team attack into Keys, clear him off the board safely. His attack back is not sufficient to hit either Task or Baron Mordo, and Psylocke puts another wound on Dark Phoenix. Phoenix recruits Thanos, which is the first significant threat played all game. And Thanos goes into Baron Mordo, putting the first wound on that main character. Unfortunately for Phoenix, Mordo is holding the perfect answer. Phoenix uses a ranged attack to safely clear Ronin off the board. Mordo places the Hydra resource in the row, bringing 7 resource points, and recruits a Serpent Crown, taking control of Dark Phoenix's only significant threat. Due to the fact that Mordo is also running Vaults in the deck, even though Thanos is exhausted, he's still going to put a wound on Dark Phoenix this turn. Psylocke hits Dark Phoenix, forcing a final card from her hand. The Vault is paid to Thanos to stack 2 wounds on Dark Phoenix, bringing her to a total of 6. And at this point, the game is essentially over. Now, there are some threats that could be drawn here, such as Fing Fang Foom. Unfortunately, Dark Phoenix draws a resource and a Mantis, which essentially counts as a resource. This is insufficient to do anything to the Mordo board or even put up any kind of defense. There are no attacks that can be made by Dark Phoenix that can do anything relevant to Mordo's side of the board. Even suiciding Mantis to gain an additional resource is not going to be useful at this point in the game. Two Leviathans come into play for Mordo this turn. The first targeting one of the face-up resources, and the second dazing Mantis. So she is out of the way, but does not actually get used for ramp. And then Thanos kills Dark Phoenix using her own character. And that's game.